Welcome back to the deep dive. You ready to dive into something a little different today?
Always.
Yeah.
What have you got for us?
Well, we're cracking open this novel manuscript I got my hands on.
Oh, cool.
It's called Love You, Dad.
Oh, okay.
But here's the thing. It's not your typical, beginning, middle, and end kind of story.
Okay.
It's written in these numbered takes, almost like little snapshots from different points in the protagonist's life.
Interesting. So it's like we're getting these glimpses into his world, but not necessarily in chronological order.
Exactly. It's like the author's giving us pieces of a puzzle and saying, okay, you figure out how this all fits together.
I like that. That sounds like a fun challenge.
Yeah, it definitely keeps you on your toes. So, should we start piecing this puzzle together?
Let's do it. Where do we even begin with something like this?
Well, why don't we start with what we know about the protagonist's childhood?
Yeah, okay.
And right off the bat, it's pretty heavy stuff.
So,
He loses both of his parents when he's really young and ends up being raised by his older sister on a farm in Tasmania.
it's like that classic setup for a resilient character, right?
Yeah.
You know, that kind of upbringing where they have to learn to be independent and resourceful from a young age.
Exactly. And there's this really touching detail about his bond with his dog, Snappy. He really clings to that companionship, especially, without having parents around.
Makes sense. You can imagine how much he'd crave that kind of connection.
Yeah, it's like you can almost feel that longing for connection just kind of radiating off the page.
So how about those teenage years? Does he start to find those connections he's looking for?
Well, as he gets older, we see him start to navigate those, typical adolescent experiences.
The love, all that.
Exactly. And all the awkwardness that comes with it. Remember that scene at the wedding where he meets his future girlfriend, Jade?
Oh, yeah. What was it? He spills punch on her or something?
No, it's even better.
Yeah.
He's just so flustered, totally tongue-tied, and his sister ends up kicking him under the table.
Oh, man. Classic. You can just picture that whole scene playing out.
It's hilarious. But, it also says something about his relationship with his sister, too. Like, she's always there to kind of nudge him in the right direction.
It's like a little glimpse into their dynamic. Even in those embarrassing moments, they've got each other's backs.
Definitely. Then, as he enters adulthood, he ends up diving headfirst into the Melbourne music scene.
Oh, cool. So he's a musician.
Yeah, a pianist. He forms these really tight friendships with these three guys, Willie, Chad, and Jack.
And I bet each of them has their own perspective on life and love and all that.
Exactly. Willie's all about that passionate, follow your heart kind of love,
Okay.
while Chad's a bit more cynical and jaded.
Ah, the realist of the group.
Right. And then there's Jack, who's all set to settle down and get married.
So the protagonist got all these different viewpoints swirling around him. It's like he's trying to figure out where he fits in, what he believes.
And that's where he encounters Chad's father, George. He's this super successful businessman, but he's got a pretty cynical view of love.
Uh-oh. What's his take?
He's all about chasing wealth and power, sees love as a distraction, that kind of thing.
It's interesting how the author throws in these contrasting characters, right? Like, George is almost the opposite of what the protagonist seems to be searching for.
And it really makes you wonder, how is the protagonist going to react to this guy's influence? It's this pivotal moment where he starts to question his own desires and expectations.
And then things take another turn, right? He ends up in New York City.
Yep. He gets a scholarship to Juilliard.
Wow. Prestigious.
Yeah. Speaking of those formative years, let's rewind a bit and go back to the protagonist's adolescence, when he's first grappling with love and all that.
Okay. Yeah, I remember you were telling me about that wedding where he meets Jade.
Yeah. And it's interesting because that scene also marks a turning point in his relationship with his sister, Kara.
How so?
Well, there's this moment later on where he's driving home from the wedding and suddenly hits him. All the sacrifices Kara made to raise him.
Oh, wow. So he's starting to see her as more than just his big sister.
Exactly. He's recognizing her as a woman who gave up her own dreams to take care of him. It's a moment of deep empathy and gratitude.
That's a powerful realization. It really changes the dynamic between them.
And then, of course, there's his relationship with Jade. The manuscript really captures that intensity of first love. The highs and the lows, the excitement, the uncertainty.
Yeah, those first loves can be all-consuming, and it sounds like it doesn't exactly end well for him.
No, it doesn't. There's this gut-wrenching scene where Jade confesses to being with someone else. It's brutal.
Oh, man, I hate those moments of betrayal. They just shatter your whole world.
It's not just about the betrayal, though. It's about that loss of innocence, the realization that love can be painful, that people can hurt you.
It's a tough lesson to learn, but I guess it's a part of growing up.
And those scars from heartbreak, they kind of follow him into adulthood. Even as he moves to Melbourne and starts immersing himself in the music scene, he's still carrying that baggage.
So it's like he's trying to find himself both as a musician and as a man while also dealing with the aftermath of this heartbreak.
Exactly. And remember those friends he makes, Willie, Chad, and Jack? They each represent a different way of approaching relationships.
Right. So Willie's all about passion, Chad's the cynic, and Jack's headed for the traditional marriage route. It's like he's surrounded by these contrasting views on love and he's trying to figure out his own path.
And it's not just romantic relationships either. His friendships are complex too, especially his dynamic with Chad, who's got some pretty outrageous views on women.
That sounds like a recipe for some interesting conversations.
Oh yeah, they definitely butt heads sometimes.
Yeah.
But there's also this underlying respect between them, this willingness to challenge each other's perspectives.
It shows that the protagonist isn't afraid to engage with different viewpoints, even those that make him uncomfortable.
And then, of course, there's that pivotal encounter with Chad's father, George, in New York. He's the epitome of that materialistic worldview we were talking about before.
Oh yeah, the successful businessman who sees love as a weakness.
Yep. And it's such a stark contrast to the protagonist's own longing for authentic connection, both in his personal life and in his music.
So he's caught between these two opposing forces, the allure of success and power versus the pursuit of genuine human connection. It's a classic struggle.
And it really makes you wonder, how is he going to reconcile these conflicting desires? Will he succumb to the pressure to conform? Or will he stay true to his artistic vision?
It seems like he's constantly being tested, forced to make these choices that will ultimately define who he becomes.
It's like this ongoing internal battle, this tug of war between his head and his heart. And speaking of his heart, let's move on to the next chapter of his journey, the one that takes him to the heart of his creative process, his musical breakthrough.
Oh, I'm intrigued. How does he finally break through those creative barriers? What sparks that moment of inspiration?
So we've seen him as a son, a brother, friend, lover, a father, but there's another side to him, right?
Yeah.
The artist.
Yeah. And this manuscript really delves into the ups and downs of his journey as a composer, especially as he's working on his first symphony. There's a lot of self-doubt and struggle.
It's not just about the technical stuff, right? It feels like he's pouring his whole being into his music, all those emotions and experiences we've been talking about.
Absolutely. It's like he's trying to translate his life into music to make sense of it all. And remember his mentor, Isaac. He plays a big part in helping him tap into that emotional depth.
Right. Isaac's the one who teaches him about the importance of silence and listening, not just in music, but in life too.
It sounds simple, but it's actually quite profound, isn't it? To really be present, to quiet the noise in your head and just listen.
It's like Isaac's guiding him to look inward, to find his own unique voice, instead of trying to imitate others or chase after fame and recognition.
And that's where true creativity comes from, right? When you're not afraid to be vulnerable, to express your authentic self.
There's this really beautiful scene where he talks about his collaboration with Tori, the singer.
Yeah.
It's like through that partnership, that shared energy, that his music really starts to come alive.
It shows how powerful collaboration can be, how working with others can push you to new heights, creatively and emotionally.
Like their voices blend together to create something truly special, something that wouldn't have been possible if they were working alone.
And speaking of journeys, let's talk about his trip to Ireland.
Oh yeah, that's a big one. He goes there wanting to connect with his family history and explore his musical roots, but it ends up being so much more than that.
He uncovers some family secrets, right?
Yeah.
And he meets this amazing woman, Sharon, who really shakes things up for him.
It's like all these different threads of his life, his search for identity, his longing for love, the weight of the past, they all kind of converge in Ireland.
And it's through those experiences, those challenges and heartbreaks, that he starts to understand himself on a deeper level.
It's amazing how the author manages to weave together all these different parts of his life, his childhood, his relationships, his music, his fatherhood, all in this kind of nonlinear way.
It's like we're getting these glimpses into different moments, these snapshots of his journey. And even though they're not in chronological order, they somehow create this cohesive and powerful narrative.
It makes you realize that life isn't always a straight line. It's messy, it's unpredictable, it's full of surprises, but it's through those twists and turns that we learn and grow and become who we are meant to be.
And ultimately, that's what makes this manuscript so compelling. It's a story about resilience, about the power of love and forgiveness, about finding your voice in a world that's constantly trying to define you, of truly great art. It's not just entertaining, it's transformative. It has the power to change the way you see the world. and yourself.
So if you're looking for a story that will challenge you, move you, and inspire you, keep an eye out for Love You, Dad. It's a journey worth taking.